interfaith pilgrimage of the Middle Passage was a great experiment, and it was envisioned by a white woman who was a Buddhist nun and my spiritual teacher. And she wrote to me from Sri Lanka, and she was on a peace mission in Sri Lanka. And she got this message that she needs to be doing that particular work that she does in her own war-torn country of the United States. And she needs to start, as a white person, addressing racism. And so she wrote to me from Sri Lanka and said that she had a proposition for me, and that she would be flying back to the States that following week, and could we meet? And she came to my home, and we sat for about 15 hours in my apartment in Amherst and looked at the possibility of making a journey to examine racism by going to the root of it. Wow. I didn't know what to say, because she asked me to head up the project. I had never been on a pilgrimage before. I had been on small walks with her, but she was like, let's envision this. What if we got a group of people of African descent and people of European descent walking the combined history together, and we go back to the African continent? And so I said, talk more. And so she says, well, we would start off in Africa, and we would do the Middle Passage journey back to the US. And so I said, you almost had me, Sister Claire, but for me, I don't know anyone of African descent who was not born on that continent that would want to go there to leave it again. I think the journey has to be in reverse. And it will be like a homegoing, and we will look at the history together. And so in 1998, we embarked on that journey after 6 years of organizing. And we got a group of the descendants of the people that enslaved Africans and the descendants of the Africans that were stolen from the continent. And we made that journey, and it was 13 months. It was quite arduous, as you all can imagine, but I cannot imagine not having done it, because it has informed the way that I do my work today as an activist, as a cultural activist. And I knew on the journey that we were going to be learning from the communities that we walked through. We walked 20 miles a day down the eastern seaboard of the United States to 4 Caribbean islands, Brazil, and West Africa, and ending in South Africa. And we decided we wanted to end in South Africa because even though their history of slavery was not a part of the transatlantic slave trade, it was part of the East Indian slave trade. But at that time, at that period of time, we wanted to end in a place of hope on the African continent. And for us, at that time, South Africa was that beacon. That was the beacon of hope. And Nelson Mandela was just finishing up his 5 years of being the first Black president of the Republic of South Africa. So we wanted to be there for the changing of the guard when he would pass the baton on to Thabo Mbeki. And so we were fortunate enough and blessed enough to get Archbishop Tutu, Desmond Tutu, to be the chair of our advisory board. And that was thrilling. He really came through for us and opened a lot of doors, especially on the continent. But we walked 20 miles a day down the eastern seaboard, and this pilgrimage was not funded. People came on their own steam, and that was a great part of the experiment, because we said, if we do this honest work, really looking at ways together on how to dismantle racism by going to communities, people are going to latch onto that idea, and they're going to help us. And we stayed in communities where people fed us. They gave us places to sleep. We had fellowship with communities, and we talked about what slavery was like in those particular areas that we went to, those cities and towns that we went to. But we also talked about the current slavery and violence that was happening, to people in those places. And so it was a great, fellowship, and we had people walking with us. We started out with 50 people. We had people that came. We had monks come from Japan. We had Japanese devotees of the order of Nippon Hoji. We had a mother and daughter from Chile. We had a gentleman from Peru. So people caught on to this idea when the word was out that there was going to be this great undertaking that had never been done before, this great experiment. Everybody wanted to join us, and I think that's how you get the work done. I love working in the grassroots, because it's always the grassroots that affect change, right? Um, and that's the work that we're all doing. We work with the grassroots, and with the people on the ground, the people that are suffering, the oppressed. And it was an amazing journey. And so as we're going along, I knew that I was learning so much about the system of slavery and how that worked, that I knew that I was not going to, at the end, I was not going to come back to the United States to live, that I needed to know more, especially when I got to places like Haiti and Cuba. And when I got on the African continent, I definitely knew that I was not going to return to the US, but I wasn't sure where I was going to be, So when I was in Senegal, I was in love with Senegal. I'm going to come back to Senegal. When I got to Cote d'Ivoire, I loved Cote d'Ivoire. Ghana was amazing. Oh, yes, I got to Benin, and Benin called on me. But when I got to South Africa and got to Cape Town, I knew I was home. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was Table Mountain and the energy that came from the mountain, but I knew I needed to be at that place. And I think I needed to be there and plant some roots there. Not that was where my ancestry it's from, or my heritage, but the history of apartheid and the history of Jim Crow are so parallel. Our histories are so parallel. And the whole issue around racism. The architects of apartheid fashioned it after the American Jim Crow system. And I did not know that, but I learned that history when I got to Cape Town. And because it was a new dispensation, and Black folks finally had their freedom, they were needing, and especially the young people, they were needing information from the outside world, because that country had been closed off for 50 years. People didn't even have televisions. Televisions were kind of outlawed in South Africa for a long time. I learned a lot. And so I spent time there before the pilgrimage arrived. I went ahead, and I spent about 3 weeks in Cape Town, organizing, working with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, who hosted us, and as well as St. George's Cathedral, which was Desmond Tutu's church. And everyone that I met with ex-combatants and people that were, an integral part of the liberation struggle, all grassroots folks, telling me these stories and saying, you need to come back here. Why don't you come back and work with us and work with our kids? And because we want to learn from you. And I says, well, if I come back, I want to learn from you. So it's going to be an equal exchange. And 6 months later, I moved back. I moved to Cape Town. The pilgrimage ended. And I came home and sold all my things and gave stuff away. And I left. My daughter was with me on the pilgrimage. She turned 18 on the pilgrimage. And so I went back, and I went back for the Parliament of World Religions because the pilgrimage was one of many organizations that was recognized as a gift of service to the world. And so we were invited to go back to the Parliament of World Religions. And so I went back with a small delegation from the pilgrimage to the Parliament. And then when that delegation left to go back to the States, I stayed. And I stayed 10 years. And that 10 years changed the trajectory of my life. I can't imagine not being an activist and not trying and not helping to make change in the world, in people's lives. And I'm really proud at what I do, at the work that I've done, and the work that I'm going to continue doing, and until I take my last breath. I just turned 75 3 weeks ago, and I feel great. I still have good energy, and I'm just going to keep doing what I do because it has to be done. The world depends on us.